Why does a decision on oil output by OPEC plus bring together the leaders of Russia, UAE and Saudi Arabia? Let's delve into the details. The Kremlin has recently announced that President Vladimir Putin is set to visit the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia. This announcement comes hot on the heels of OPEC's decision to cut oil output, a decision that has stirred the global oil market. It's important to note that these cuts, while significant, will not take immediate effect. The oil market is vast and somewhat resistant to quick change, and there are processes of inertia at work. In other words, the market has a certain weight and doesn't turn on a dime. This has led to a fair degree of skepticism in the market, with questions about whether these voluntary cuts will indeed be fully implemented. As part of his visit, Putin will discuss potential coordinated actions on global oil markets during his Gulf trip. Talks within the Organization of Petroleum, exporting countries and its allies, known as OPEC+, will also be high on the agenda. And so, President Putin embarked on his journey to the Gulf, with the world watching closely. But what does a Middle East trip and a meeting with Iran's president have to do with global oil markets, you might ask? Well, let's delve into it. On a seemingly regular Wednesday, President Vladimir Putin set foot in the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia. This wasn't a casual visit, though. Putin's trip to the Gulf was centered around discussions on potential coordinated actions on global oil markets, specifically in the context of the recent oil output cuts agreed on by OPEC+. As the Kremlin had earlier confirmed, these output cuts would need time to kick in due to the inherent inertia in the oil market. Yet the coordination must continue, and that's exactly what Putin sought to ensure with his visit. But the plot thickens. The day following his Gulf trip, Putin returned to Russia, this time to host a meeting with the president of Iran, Ibrahim Raisi. Much like his Gulf counterparts, Raisi too was to partake in discussions that centered around the oil markets. Yet beneath the surface of these oil-centered discussions, another narrative was being woven. Putin, in his characteristic fashion, was seeking to build global alliances with non-Western countries, a move seen as part of his broader strategy to counterbalance Western influence. This effort was particularly significant given the recent sanctions placed on Russia over the conflict in Ukraine. And thus, Putin's diplomatic chess game in the Middle East was set in motion. So what does all this mean for the world, and how are international entities reacting to these events? The implications of these meetings and decisions are expected to reverberate across global oil markets, with the OPEC plus oil producers sticking to their output increases despite the rising oil prices and geopolitical tensions. The skepticism from the international community, especially the United States and its allies, is palpable. The US in particular has accused OPEC of siding with Russia amidst the conflict with Ukraine. These meetings also signal a shift in Russia's foreign policy, with Putin keen to build global alliances with non-Western countries. This move is seen as an attempt to counter the sanctions imposed by the US and the EU nations over the conflict in Ukraine. In fact, despite these sanctions, Russia has bolstered its presence in the Middle East, increasing its investment in the region by a staggering 125%. The discussions are not limited to oil and alliances alone. The agenda with Iran's president is likely to include regional issues, notably the war in Gaza between Israel and the Palestinian militant group Hamas. This could further stir the geopolitical pot, as Iran backs Israel's enemy Hamas, while Russia has frustrated Israel by hosting a Hamas delegation in Moscow. Another point of interest is the potential deal between Iran and Russia on nuclear facilities. This could potentially shift the power dynamics in the region, adding another layer of complexity to the already intricate web of international relations. All these developments are being closely watched by the world. The skepticism, the alliances, the potential deals, they all point to a changing global landscape. As the world watches these developments, the pieces on the global oil market chessboard continue to move. One thing is clear, the decisions made in these meetings will have far-reaching implications.